the first bro chat we did was last year, and the B-21 had just been unveiled, right? There was no
That's
Air
right.
Force
It was
general or
December. It was like almost 12 months ago. It was unveiled, and that, man, I can't believe it's been a year already. Holy crap!
which is crazy to me. I don't know anything about the procurement process other than it usually takes forever. But you can probably talk in the weeds of like how long the B-21's been in the works and the fact that this thing's like flying a year later. It's got a ways to go, I'm sure, but
yeah. So the
B-21,
B-21, yeah, we can talk about that. So the B-21 obviously just flew. Everyone's, it's great that we got a new production aircraft, especially a bomber. We haven't had a new bomber in 2 generations now.
yeah.
Northrop won that contract in 2015. So if you do the math, that's what, 8 years. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Ish. I mean, for a bomber, I guess. I mean, it's not like a full size bomber. It's like a 3/4 scale bomber. It's like a miniaturized.
It's just like a little
B2.
mini. It's like a little B2.
Yeah.
There's one picture from that flight. I'll have to throw it up there. Like it's not a flattering picture of the B2, but it's like nose on, like looking up. It's like it has like 4 chins. Like,
it does. Yeah, it definitely has a couple chins. It looks like at certain angles. Yeah. Have you seen the angle? For those of you who are, the B-21 versus the B-2. The B-21 is probably like 3/4 scale. It's got 2 engines versus 4. You can see it's only got 1 main bomb bay instead of 2. And then the real takeaway when they unveiled it, the first thing I noticed was the landing gear. You go, hey, those wheels can't support that much weight. This thing's got to be a lot smaller than you think it is. And it is, right? And there's a picture from that first flight. So it's being chased by an F-16 from at Edwards. And there's a picture that has a really good frame, like a 3/4 angle looking up of the Viper close to the B-21. And you can just see like, oh, a Viper is not a very big aircraft. And that B-21 is not very much bigger than the Viper. So it's not as big as I think a lot of people think when they think of like a bomber, but it is the first new bomber we've had in a long time. America, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Freedom. Yeah, and it's one of the few programs that's actually somewhat on time and well, it's on budget only because of the way the contract's structured. So fun fact, Northrop is actually losing money on that program right now. They're not making any money.
Really? That's wow. I did mention in my newsletter last week about Boeing losing their minds over Air Force One. Like they're losing.
Oh man, Boeing's burning like $1 million a day. Boeing Defense. That's how much money they lose. $1 million a day, and most of that's the Air Force One program, which is like the VC-25, the recap. So 2 aircraft, 747s, and in the save money, they're like, we're going to buy used 747s. So I think we're actually supposed to go to like a Russian airline. And so the 2 new Air Force Ones, ironically, are like former like Russian airliners that are being converted. Even that's over budget. Like it's not even a brand new airplane. So I don't know.
That's wild.
I don't know anything about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was like,
defense, except that it's
I was like, I wonder like what is cost, what the overruns are.
I don't know. Some of that's like fixed price contracts. That's what a lot of those charges are. So Boeing probably 7 years ago, something like that, to increase market share for like capture, they started bidding on fixed price contracts instead of cost plus. So cost plus, the government assumes all the risk for overages, and a fixed price, that's the price. And if you go over the price, like you have to eat the money. And so like the T7, like they won a T7 program. That's a fixed price. They're losing money on that right now. I think the Wedgetail is too, the VC-25. There's like 4 aircraft programs. They were all fixed price to like, gain market share. And they are, but they're also losing money. So yeah. I hear that the B-21 though it'll eventually, probably in about 5 or 6 years, we'll actually start making some money. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, it's still because it's 2027 is IOC or when it's supposed to show up at.
Yeah, it's probably something like that. I'd put my money on 2028 if I was a betting man, but that's like IOC barely could do some things. It's in a squadron. There's so many people trained, and when it like full operational stuff, probably not till like 2030, early 30s, because now you have LRSO, the new nuclear cruise missile, and I'm sure there's other things going in that aircraft for like weapons and things like that. But one of the cool things that most people don't realize, like it's being branded as a next generation bomber and a 6th generation aircraft, and in some ways it is, but the magic sauce of like how this program was able to stay relatively at cost and relatively on schedule is they just reuse stuff. Like a lot of the stuff out of the aircraft is like it just sourced out of the parts bins, you know. Like we don't need a new cockpit. We can use these displays out of this other program, or we don't need this ejection seat. We can pull it out of this program. Same thing with like the engines, the landing gear, the radar, all the subsystems. Like they're spending the money on basically the wrapper, you know. Put all the stuff in the big wrapper in the platform, and you know that's kind of like what the F-117 program did. It was like one of the last aircraft programs that the U.S. had that was actually like on schedule, like to the day almost. It was like 6 years, and they used you know the story about this? They used the F-16 flight control computer. That was how they got it to fly. The brakes off of an F-15, the engines off of a Hornet, the HUD out of the Hornet, and then it used a C-130 ECS, the environmental control system, F-111 flight control actuators, and a B-52 INS. So they just threw this stuff together and it's like put it in something that has, you know, this outer mold line, and you know, good enough, right?
That's hey, it worked, right?
Yeah, and then you get into like, you know, F-35 or F-22. It's like every single thing is completely designed from scratch. Like, oh, do we really need these like, you know, consecutive miracles to make this thing happen? Like,
well, and then everything's proprietary, and then, you know.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the interesting things that you see now with the B-21. There's the first aircraft that it was negotiated the data rights. So the Air Force is building a digital twin. The sustainment of the aircraft is actually being opened up for competition. And so one of the dirty secrets in the defense industry is that you don't make money selling the aircraft. You make the money on sustaining it. So like the F-35 program is a $400 billion program to buy the aircraft, but it's like $1.4 trillion on the back end to sustain it. And so they've locked down the IP and the sustainment contracts out to like 2070. So they own the supply chain. They own all the suppliers. Like they own everything. Like the Air Force is like, never again, never again.
Well, I didn't realize it until I was in the F-16, and then hearing, you know, if we wanted to change code in the software, I say we, not me, you know, someone smarter than me want to change code, right? It took forever to do it. But then the Guard, they could go right to Ogden and change it because of the way the contract was written. And then funny, on that same line, I heard the Ford CEO, he was talking about electric vehicles and some of the struggles they were having with it. So I think he said, you know, whatever a Mustang, whatever electric vehicle at Ford has 150 different pieces of operating system and software, all owned by the manufacturers of the different parts. Like the seat adjuster, Bosch makes that, for instance.
Oh yeah, Bosch. Whew.
But if they want to change it, right, they got to go to Bosch to have that change to interface into their system. Versus like Tesla, from the ground up, they own all of it and can make the changes really quickly. And
yeah, the average like modern vehicle, if you bought a vehicle in the last 10 years, it has something like 20 to 30 different computer processors running and 100 million lines of code. And so integrating all of that, like plug and play, throw it away, like your ability to crack into that stuff. Yeah, a fun fact, since you're talking about Ford in vehicles, you ever have a crackberry? Remember that?
I mean, what is it, like 20 years ago, maybe?
Yeah. Do you know what that company pivoted into? No. Automotive software. That is their number one source of revenue. Yeah, they're huge in the automotive market. They do like integration for software for vehicles. Yeah.
Talk about a huge pivot, because like TomTom, kind of same deal. Like they made it into like, you know, actually selling their map software, right? Because, you know, used to be like, oh, you had a TomTom to get around. Yeah. But everyone had a BlackBerry back in the day, and then just like overnight, probably around 2007, goodbye. So yeah, good on whoever saw that pivot, I guess.
Aligned with the rise of the iPhone, right? Like here's the iPhone, and then it's like, what do I want this keyboard for? Like, this thing's terrible.
But the Air Force held on to it for 10 years or so. It's like, hey, you know what? Everyone can finally switch to an iPhone.
That's right. Okay. That's right. Better late than never, I guess. Yeah.
Leading the way.
Yeah. Man, how we go from B-21s to cars to crackberries? I don't even know.
We cover a lot of ground. I'm so curious all right, so B-21, talk like NGAD. One, why do we need a new bomber other than the fact that we haven't had a new bomber in almost 3 decades, right? 2.5 decades.
Yeah. All right. I'll talk about that first. Let's start with that. Then
Yeah.
we'll just riff. All right. So, right now, the Air Force has 140 bombers, which sounds like a lot. Superpower coming through. But we have a lot of fighters, like 2,000 something fighters, right? If you look at like fighter to bomber force ratio, it's like 1 to 10, 1 to 15, I think 1 to 15 right now. If you go back and look at like global competition and the Cold War, all that, it's usually like half of that, like 1 to 7, 1 to 8. We're at like 1 to 15. So when you look at bomber requirements, the Air Force is trying to grow the bomber force to about 175 bombers. That's 100 B-21s plus 75 or 76 B-52s with the upgraded, the J model, the upgraded engines and stuff. But there's a lot of studies that say we actually need like 300 bombers. And that sounds like a lot of bombers, right? But here's the deal that I don't think a lot of people understand. Everyone, if you were like a cool Air Force in this world, you have a fighter. You have a fighter squadron, you have a fighter fleet, you go to air shows, it loops for music, people take pictures in front of it. Do you know how many countries in the world have bombers? 3. The US, China, and Russia. That's it. So when you look at NATO, there's no long range strike. None of our allies have a long range strike capability. It's us. That's it. So when you look at like 300 bombers, may sound like a lot, but when you add it up from the coalition perspective, like, yep, we need 300 bombers. So that's really why we needed a bomber. There was a bomber program that failed in the early 2000s. That was going to be the B-3, the next gen bomber, what it was called. It failed, and the spinoff of that became LRS-B, which is where the B-21 came from. So that's why when the program was invented, it had a fixed price because the other program was like out of control with technology ideas. It's like, well, if we just make it a fixed price, we'll constrain what's the art of the possible. And because we buy aircraft based on weight, there's a correlation between weight and cost, you kind of determine how big the aircraft's going to be by just, how much the price is. So the price in contract is $550 million in 2010 dollars. With inflation, it's like $750 million a copy right now. So it's a cost plus to develop the technology, and then it's fixed price for them to produce it. So they had to actually build the airplane with a budget in mind to make any money. So yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, it really is. And honestly, I had not thought about it, but I was like, no one else has bombers. I was doing, Russia and China is like, it is us.
It's us. That's it. Like the UK had some bombers back in the 60s and 70s, and like the V series bombers, they're all retired. France got close. They had like a supersized Mirage for a little bit, but it was like a fighter bomber. But that's it. We're at like, if we want to be, partners and allies, we want to be the people that's going to bring something to the table. Like, we need a bomber force.